I change my brain? Am I just a victim to who I am? I'm your host, Steve Sisler. Stay tuned for another episode of Behavioral Insights.
Alrighty, folks, glad you tuned in. We're about to embark on a series here on the Behavioral Insights podcast. I'm your host, Steve Sisler. I'm not sure what I'm going to call it, though. I've been thinking about it, and a title really escapes me. So at this point, for whatever reason, I'm coming up with Waking Up. I'm just going to talk about some people I know, some of their story. I'm going to talk about some characters in the Torah and things like that, just to give you a sense of the right patterns and principles that when we wake up and see what's really going on in ourselves and in the world, our chances of reaching our destiny exponentially grow. So that's what we're going to be talking about. I know that was a bizarre explanation, but this is off the cuff, folks. That's just the way I'm doing it here. And we'll get through it. But this is going to be part one of probably 6 to 7 maybe parts of this series, and I hope you really enjoy it. Coming up, Waking Up. All right, folks, let's get into this. So this is really an introduction. We're not going to get into the whole of the series, really. We're just going to introduce it in this podcast. So I hope that's okay. But that's what I'm going to do. So I have a friend, and for the last 12 years or so, I've witnessed, his evolution, the evolution of his professional and personal life. Mike is really in his sweet spot right now. I mean, he is in a perfect place. The sweet spot is really, it's a simple place. It's where we function without having to think about it. It's an effortless place of being, not really doing. It's really about being, where we function with continued and uninterrupted unconscious competence. So you may have heard that, unconscious competence. Unconscious competence is when you're performing a skill automatically with little to zero effort. When I go to speak publicly, I don't have to think about it. I can get up on stage. It does not matter how big the crowd is, and immediately I'm in my zone. I'm in my sweet spot. I know my material like the back of my hand. I love the people I'm speaking to, and I can't wait to help them. So all pistons fire when I'm in my sweet spot, and it's really unconscious competence. I'm on automatic pilot. I don't need a PowerPoint. I don't need anything. I don't need notes. And I could stand there and talk for 10 hours without repeating myself and feel like $1 million doing it. So anyway, that was a little much. But that's the place of unconscious competence. What are some of these other levels here? There's an unconscious incompetent level where we're completely unaware of our skills, and we're completely unaware of our proficiency when trying to perform the skill that we're unaware of. Okay, now some people are there, and that's okay. You don't have to live there. You're there right now, but you can leave. What's another level? Conscious incompetence, where we're aware of the skill, but not yet proficient when performing it. In other words, we know what we're doing and we're getting better at it, but we're not quite there yet. So we're conscious, but yet we're still not fully competent at whatever it is we're doing. And then the next level is conscious competence. So we are able to use the skill, but have to work to maintain it. So we're competent and we're conscious about our competence, but it's work. It just doesn't come natural. We have to think about it versus not having to think about it. And that's an okay place. But the best place to be is when you're performing your skills and you don't have to think about it. It's virtually without effort. Now, I personally believe anybody can find this place no matter who you are and no matter where you are. But the problem is some people will never discover this in their entire lifetime. And so part of this series is about trying to help you find it. And helping you find it is going to be through a series of stories and ideas and thoughts that I've had over the last 35 years, where these have been assets in me helping me find my place of being in the world. It's what's helped Mike find his place. And the reason why Mike has discovered this place of being is one of the main reasons, because he wasn't looking for it. He was just being himself without an overextended or an exaggerated view of himself. He just was being him. And oftentimes we don't do this. We're so concerned about what other people are doing, what other people are thinking. We're not just being ourselves. And so that's what the premise of this series is going to be about. It's about being yourself, understanding yourself, and ways to be better. And that's why I'm calling it Waking Up, because I want you to wake up and realize what might be going on in your life that's keeping you from reaching your destiny. And that's what this is going to be about. So I got another friend named Paul. So this goes back a few years when Paul was living in California. Paul's a sales guy. He's had many sales jobs. And there was a time when he said something to me that caught my attention when he was on a job search. And he told me that there were these people that he seemed to not be able to get away from. He said they were everywhere. And I said, well, what are you talking about? He said, these are the people that operate in egoism. They act like they're managers of the universe. He said those people with unrealistic expectations that when it comes right down to it, they really don't know what they're talking about or what they're doing, but they expect you to know. And I laughed with him and said, yeah, I've ran into those people. He goes, what drives me crazy is you can't get away from them. They're everywhere. And so, I thought about that and I thought it was funny. And I also thought it was a sad and telling statement that according to his experience, these people were everywhere. So does this mean that a better workplace with better people in it doesn't exist? No, I don't think so. I know there are a few places where people act better than that, but they're limited, right? So it's really not about those other people in the workplace. The focus has to be about or on you in your workplace or on you in your endeavors and in your life, not about those around you that are trying to influence you this way or that way or negatively or positively. It's about you. It's about where you are now and where you want to go in spite of who may be in your space, in your way, or who you might want to blame for your lack of professional or personal progression or anything like that. It's about whether or not you're going to arrive at your desired location using your current strategy and model of thinking. So for most of us, I'll tell you right now, our current strategy's not working, in the model of thinking that we're using isn't working. 84% of the public is waiting on the job they really want. Or we could call that their dream job. And it's almost like they expect it to show up in their driveway. And the reason being is because they don't know where to find it. They don't really know what it looks like. And they don't know how to achieve it or to get it. Or a better term would be to receive it. They just don't know how. And so my hope is that some of the stuff we're going to be talking about in this series is going to help you get there. So I've learned that those who ultimately end up in a niche or a perfect place or a sweet spot weren't really looking for it. In my experience, their sweet spot was actually looking for them. Now, I have said this, if you've known me or if you've coached with me, you've heard me say it. You don't chase your destiny. Your destiny is chasing you. The problem is it can't catch you. And the reason why it can't catch you is because you're outrunning it. In other words, you're trying too hard to achieve, and it disables you from being in a position to be able to receive. And I firmly believe destinies are not achieved, they're received. I believe that with my whole heart. And part of the things we're going to look at in this series are going to help make that really, really clear. I'm in a good place. I'm in my sweet spot. And it hasn't always been that way. And I remember the day the tide really began to turn, and it was in May of 2005. And, you know, that's going to come up in this series. We'll talk a little bit about that. But I've been working with people for more than 25 years in some form or another, and I've discovered a myriad of interesting truths about the mind, about personality, human nature, and how people think in general. And these are some of the things I want to share with you. So, as we move forward in this series, I want to address some of the most intriguing aspects of human emotion, behavior, and how these behaviors affect our life and work. Now, a lot of what I've learned, I've gleaned from reading the ancient stories found in the Tanakh and the Torah. So I'm going to be talking about some of those stories. Stories that reflect characters such as Joseph, Moses, King Solomon, King David, and a few others. Now, I don't want to argue the validity of the ancient tales we're going to be talking about, but I want to capture the patterns and the principles that they contain. So I'm not a theologian, I'm not a scholar, I'm simply someone who's, read these stories over and over for 40 years. And I've capitalized on the behavioral and the idealistic principles that are contained in the tales. And I believe that if you listen, you can learn from them like I have. I've also gleaned some things from certain relationships I've been involved in. I've gleaned things from my own life and my own decision-making processes. And I've gleaned a lot from my friend Mike. Mike is one of those guys who's much smarter than he gives himself credit for. You might know somebody like that. They do more by accident than some other people you might know are trying to do on purpose. And they're not fully aware of their greatest strengths. You might bring them up to them, but they always act a little surprised or shy or, oh, shucks, thanks for saying that, blah, blah, blah. And so people have been doing this for thousands of years. It's nothing new. People have a fear of failure. It's the fear of failing that many times short circuits the mechanisms that really open the doors that avail all of us to our destiny. And I don't want you to be afraid of failing. I want you to embrace the fact that you might fail, and you'll probably fail, at least in one area or another in your life. And so it's important that you understand that. As we move forward in the series, the first thing I'm going to talk about is some principles and patterns in the story of Moses found in the Torah. And so these stories hold some real interesting patterns and principles that can really renovate you if you allow them to sink in and become part of the way you do things. So I call this the Moses effect, based on some real interesting principles and patterns I find in this story. But before we get into that, I want to talk to you a little bit about renovation. I renovated our kitchen recently. It was built in 1978, so you can imagine, right? Now, here's one thing I've learned. Reconstruction is more difficult than new construction. Okay, reconstruction is renovating. It's really about removing things. It's a remodeling process. It's improving broken things, damaged things, or outdated structures, right? So many of our actions, our thinking, and our ideas, they need to be uprooted. They need to be replaced with fresh enthusiasm, admitting where we suck or where we've done wrong things or where we've made huge mistakes, and just, make ourselves available to doing something different. But before you do that, you have to embrace where you failed. You have to say, you know what, I screwed it up. All right, let's go. Let's move on. And doing that is super powerful, and it will really help you to make necessary change. So nobody's perfect, all right? Nobody. Unfortunately, bad ideas can be like old friends. To get rid of them, it's almost like you're grieving their loss. It's hard to do, which is why many either don't bother to do it or they can't do it. And this is where we got to be careful, because self-pity will always agree with you, and it keeps you from being your best or an improved self. And this is what I have found. I can remember I was in a session with somebody going over some things that I was going through, and I remember looking at him and saying to the person, I said, you know what, I think I figured it out. And he said, what's that? I said, I love being a victim. And he busted out laughing. He said, nobody has ever said that to me. I said, yeah, the problem is I'm getting tired of it. Okay, that was over 8 years ago. And it was that day that I determined being a victim was like a friend. And, but it wasn't a good friend. It was a bad friend. And, your brain, it doesn't seek to verify if what you're doing is good or bad. It only seeks to justify why you do it. And if it has to, your brain will create a story as to why doing something stupid is the best thing you could do. And that was one of the things I had to learn. And it's been one of my mantras ever since. You have to seek verification if what you're doing is working for you, because most of the time, folks, it isn't. And so this is important. So we can find comfort in the familiar, no matter how wrong or misguided it is. This is the kind of comfort, though, that'll kill you. It's like somehow convincing you that where you are is good and where you want to be is impossible. And I'm just telling you that's not true. All right, some forms of self-awareness. They're tricky and subtle. And part of this series is going to help you become very aware of some things in your own life. Self-awareness can be as simple as understanding your self-worth and your capacity to do something really well or even not so well. Or it can be tricky, like when you're looking for your sunglasses while they are on your head, right? So this is like getting a revelation. Or maybe you're looking for your keys while they're in your hand the whole time. Now, I was on my phone once, my cell phone, with my wife while looking for my cell phone. Now, that sounds crazy, but that's what can happen in your mind. I'm on my phone looking for my phone, and I was really frustrated because I couldn't find it. And the fact of the matter was, I was on it. Now, the fact that I was able to do that really let me in on a clue that you can do really, really stupid things and not know you're doing it. So it's a real aha moment when I discovered, or when you discover, The keys you're looking for are in your hand, or the phone you're looking for, you're actually on it. The problem is they're out of view. And this is what we need to understand. Much of who we are as people and much of what we can do as a person is sometimes out of our view. It's not that you can't, you don't know you can. And that's the problem. So many of us have lost, are at a loss really to our place in the world, or we're at a loss when it comes to our earning power, or we're at a loss when it comes to our functional authority in relationship to things that we can do or other people in the world. We wander through the world like vagabonds, bereft of purpose and mission. We're better at taking up space than we are at creating space. These things are really important, and we're not paying attention most of the time. So as we move forward in the series, I want you to allow yourself the freedom to let go of some of the bad ideas you might have, and that may have held you back or have locked you within what I sometimes call the Eros prison of self-preservation, meaning it's extremely difficult to admit that you've done something stupid or you're on the wrong path and you just keep going. It's sort of like the proverbial guy driving without directions. He doesn't want to stop and ask for directions, so he just continues to go the wrong way. A lot of times we do that as people. So we got to do our level best to recognize where we may have been wrong, misguided, or completely off the mark. Now, when it comes to being able to take criticism, to take instruction, or to be coachable, you will only receive what you recognize, and you will lose what you criticize. People often criticize the one thing that would benefit them the most, and therefore they don't end up with it. They criticize people with money because they don't have any, and rather than recognizing their own lack of substance, they criticize another person's abundance, and so they never have any money. So you'll never have anything thinking this way, and you really need to understand that. People can struggle to welcome ideas handed to them by other people for fear of looking incompetent or stupid, right? In their own shame cave, they sit and go without the benefits that accompany learning from other people who may have greater experience or greater knowledge. I always surround myself with people that I believe are much smarter than me, at least a few, because it's really helpful. Now, as one who's really familiar with the gospel narratives, there's a portion in the New Testament where Jesus makes this statement, and I'll quote it here. He says, "Whoever welcomes a prophet as a prophet will receive a prophet's reward, and whoever welcomes a righteous person as a righteous person will reap the righteous person's reward, or will receive the righteous person's reward." So what does this even mean? So apart from you trying to, get over the hurdle that I just read you something out of the Bible, I want you to not do that. What I want you to do is understand what this paragraph means. It means this: you only are able to receive what you recognize. So in other words, if you recognize someone's knowledge, maybe a gift or ability that they have, then the odds of you reaping the benefits or the reward of that knowledge, or the information they have to offer, they're dramatically increased. So a lot of times people don't learn anything because they don't recognize the fact that somebody could teach them something. And so I'm always looking for opportunities to learn from people, even people I largely disagree with. Okay. Now, there's somebody I'm listening to right now. I've read 4 of their books, and they hold some opinions that I can't stand, right? I just completely disagree with them. But I have the sense to know they are so much smarter than me in one particular area, and everything they have to say about that area, I gobble it up. I research it, I read it, and I can't wait for more, even though there's other parts of what they say that I completely disagree with. That is what being coachable and teachable is all about. So That's what I want you to do. So if you look at the Jesus narrative in the New Testament of the Bible, his own family did not recognize him as anybody other than their kid, or the friends that knew him in that story recognized him as the carpenter's kid. And so it says that he couldn't really do anything to benefit his family or his friends in his hometown. And you may have heard the statement, a prophet is not without honor except in his hometown, right? And this is where that comes from. His family literally thought he was crazy. So he was known as a prophet without honor among his own family. And so in the same way, we ourselves will fail to reap the benefits of our own abilities and our behavioral assets when we fail to notice them or recognize them. So if you don't recognize your talent, and you don't recognize your ability, and you don't recognize where you have assets, you'll never benefit from them. This is why 84% of people have low self-esteem. They're not recognizing their assets. I talk to people all the time. I'll say, let me talk to you about your assets. And it's always a surprise and a shock to people. So 16% of the population is in a better position to grow beyond their current state of affairs because at least they believe they have some assets. Everybody else doesn't believe it. And it's hard to convince some of them. So this is what, we need to understand. So before we go any further in the series, know this: you have assets. You also have liabilities. You need to know what they both are. So you capitalize on your strengths. You embrace your weaknesses. Okay? And that's how you go forward. All right? You can't deny the weaknesses, want to change the weaknesses, focus all your attention on the weaknesses. You want to hone in on your assets. Most people ignore the assets and exaggerate the weaknesses. That's bad. That's a no-no. I don't want you doing that. And so going forward in this series, we're going to talk about you waking up and really starting to smell the coffee and learning that some of your strategies are probably not working. You've got low self-esteem possibly. You're talking yourself out of success. You're afraid of success. You're afraid of failure. You're afraid of being mischaracterized. You're afraid of people not liking you. All these different things are barriers and roadblocks to becoming the person that you already are but don't know it. It's high time, we find the keys that are sitting in your hand while you're running around the house searching for them. And that's really what I want to accomplish as we continue the series. So that's all I'm going to give you for right now. This is kind of an opening monologue to what we're going to be talking about. So stay tuned to what's coming up in this series. And that doesn't mean I won't sprinkle within this series a couple other things. I know I got some interviews coming up I'm going to be doing. So they might, be sprinkled in with the series, but I will continue to build on the series here. And I hope you really like it and get a lot out of it. So until next time, this is Steve Sisler, and you've been listening to Behavioral Insights, Part 1, or let's call it our introduction to the Waking Up series.